Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mimi Cerruti, Mimi Marie on here. Um, you are listening to the Womenpreneurs Way podcast, and this is our very first episode in our third time rebranding. And I'm so excited for it because it just feels perfectly aligned with the message that I want to serve here. And I'm super excited for our guest today, Pauline. We met actually, which is super cool too, because we met through my Womenpreneurs Way networking group, mastermind group, just a couple months ago now. And, we get people coming and going to those meetups. And, every so often someone sticks and stays and keeps coming back. And um, I love what I've learned about you so far. And I'm so happy that you said yes to coming on today. So thank you. I can't wait to share with everyone who you are. And yeah, let's just jump right in. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Pauline?
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, first I just want to say like it was pretty because I think I went to my very first event in January. So I think it was January that I first met you. And so super awesome that this happened this year. So yes, I'm Pauline Scully. I own No One's Media and I'm a content producer with video and photo. And I also offer my clients social media support. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Awesome. And I just thank you for like being so gracious because we were just talking about how, you're very technical. Like she has all her equipment over there and all of her like because she's a photographer and she produces this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm over here with my fake Zoom background and like no sound equipment, no nothing. Like we're just
You got to do what you
real
got to
raw.
do. Yes.
So it's awesome. I love it. I love that we can just, um, just be candid and
Yes.
uncut and unfiltered and all that good
100%.
stuff. So that's
Yes.
my goal here. So thank you because I'm like, well, someone like her wouldn't want to do something like this because
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. No, no. Let me really quickly say one of my biggest things too is like as a just person, and as a supporter of other like women-owned businesses or just women in general, we're often it's kind of this expectation to present ourselves only when we're done or ready or there or successful, right? And we're not often welcome to show up as a work in progress or hey, I'm like trying to do this thing right now. Like you're watching me do this thing. I'm not there yet. And I think it's so important for us to show up as we are. And I mean, welcome each other. We need to be welcoming each other and like accepting each other for where we're at. And that goes for ourselves too. And so that's my thing is like right before this, right? I was asking like, how are you doing this? Like I've always had a goal to do a podcast. Like, what's your technical? And then you're like, I'm just doing it. I'm like, that's a great answer. Just freaking do it. I love that.
yeah, yeah. And I love what you said about just showing up in the evolution of it, right? Because like this is my third version of this and I'm like I'm not gonna wait until I have it all picture perfect and figured out and all the little otherwise I won't ever do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm
That's
like,
literally where I'm at.
yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't done it because I've been waiting for like the which is again so funny because to be honest, that's not what I preach to people. I often tell people, I'm like, just start it, just start doing it. And then the second I have like, it's my turn, I tend to be like, wait, but that's not for me. Like I
right.
have to do it and
Oh
so
yeah.
yes, I so much respect for people who just even what you just shared, like you're so honest too about like this isn't my first go. Like I've been trying to work this, and it's been a work in progress, and you're like molding it as you go. And I
Yeah.
think that also is like awesome to see someone like share that process openly.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, because I think a lot of the time we don't really even know until we try, right? Like until we
Yep,
actually show up and
100%.
we're like, oh, wait, that doesn't work and that's not aligned.
That's not
So
yeah.
let me try this.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So awesome. So thank you for showing up in the raw with me.
Yeah.
um, okay, so tell me a little bit about, well, let's start with your current project. No, you know what? I don't want to do that. I want to back up a little bit.
Yes,
See,
yes.
here we are. um, real time. Um, so tell me a little bit about your story. Like what brought you to because I one of the posts that I was like, oh, I really like this girl, was your birthday post. And so obviously you have a story and you have a path that led you to doing what you're doing now. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. That post definitely surprised me because it was very difficult for me to prep it and talk about that, which again goes against like some things that I'm like, I'm very big about making mental health related conversations as normal as possible. And so again, the second that I had, had this opportunity to share mine, I was like, oh no, like what are people gonna think?
Mhm.
But basically, so I have a background in just being a creative. My first love really is music. I'm Filipino and my parents are immigrants. And so I grew up in a house with karaoke, like all kinds of music always blasting in the background. Both my parents, my dad's actually a musician. He plays guitar and my mom just loves to sing. And so I've always had a background in something creative, something kind of like a performing arts type of, thing. And in high school, I found drama, like I found theater. And that's when it really clicked for me of like, oh my gosh, like I love performing on a stage. Like I love kind of being in that place where you can, play with characters and all of that fun stuff. And so throughout my high school career, I was like really going hard into theater. And then I think it was my junior year, my parents were pretty like supportive. They were very like, oh, do you want to take additional acting classes? Like, do you want to like kind of do more things? We can see if there's acting classes that have access to agents. Like, we can get you headshots. It was very supportive. And then it came to my senior year. Okay. So now it's like, what are you going to do after this? Right. The big question of what are you going to go to college? And I was like, yeah, I want to go to college for theater. Like I want to study this. And so I want to preface this with saying like I have gone through a lot of therapy, a lot. And I understand like looking back and reflecting and doing the work, I understand, where my parents were coming from when it came to like not being able to support me fully in my wishes to do something creative, right? Again, I'm the first of three children for them, and they're immigrants. And so, it wasn't until I was an adult that I understood like the sacrifices that they made, like all this hard work, that they did to come here. And then I was born and raised here. And then for me to be like, I'm going to be an actress, like that was, for them, they're like, wait, like that's not practical. Like you're going to struggle. Like, oh my gosh, like be a nurse, um, it was nurse, doctor, engineer, or lawyer. Those were kind of the things
Mm.
that they were really hoping I would end up saying. And so basically, they had made this comment that I said I want to go to college for theater. I want to become an actress. That's really what I want to do. And this is 2005 when I was in high school. And they said something that literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. And they basically said, like, there's like, that's going to be really hard for you. Like, you're a brown person, you're Asian, and there's not really roles that are, there's not a ton of roles for people like us. That's kind of like at the time, that really wasn't, if you were like an Asian person on a TV show or a film, you were kind of like the token brown person on TV or in media. And so, what they were saying at the time was true, right? And again, they were coming from a place of like, we don't want you to struggle. Like, we want you to have a good life.
Right.
And so they said that, and I instantly took it as, okay, like that place is not for me. Like I'm not meant to take up space in that way. And then I went a completely different route. I almost like abandoned creative anything
Mm.
from there on. And I only did it, if I ever did anything creative, it was really just for myself.
Mhm.
But I didn't openly share it with like a ton of people. And so I ended up going to college. At the time, I was like, okay, well, like, what's something practical? Like, I guess I could be a teacher. So my younger brother has Down syndrome and he's also on the spectrum. And so because it's so close to home, I was like, okay, I'll be a special ed teacher. That's what I'll do.
Mhm.
And
Makes
so
sense.
I go, yeah, and then I go to Cal State San Marcos with, a liberal studies degree. Um, and I absolutely am hating life because I'm not pursuing something that, and it was so hard because it's not that I'm not pursuing something important, right, or valuable.
Yeah.
It was just so not what I wanted to be doing. And I was dorming at the time. And 3 semesters in, so let me backtrack a little bit. I have always had kind of like mental health things that I didn't know were mental health things, right? Like
Mhm.
um, we didn't have kind of access to these words or descriptions when we were younger. And like, I didn't really know certain things maybe were like not normal or like unhealthy. Um, but like I had my first suicidal thought when I was 13, and it was very vivid. And again, because I didn't have anybody to talk to really that had experienced something similar, I didn't know, like I didn't know it was not normal. So like I basically went along my life thinking like, oh, everyone must think this at some point in the day. Like it was a constant thought in my head of like, what if this, what if I didn't exist, what if I, just left essentially. And it was this thing that was like buried, but it was like always on my mind and I never talked about it. So then fast forward to this experience in college, and 3 semesters in, I'm like, I basically have a full episode where I was ready to take my life. Like I was in my dorm room and had started writing out my goodbye letters and had things prepared to take
Mhm.
care of this. And it wasn't until sorry, I'm obviously this always like brings up
Yeah.
um it wasn't until I was writing out the letters to my brother and my sister specifically that pulled me out of it, because I thought about like what, how are they going to move on from this. um And so I honestly do not remember making this phone call, but at the time I had a boyfriend. I had called him and he came and got me and he took me to my parents. And from there, it started my entire therapy mental health journey. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Mm.
And and now again, like after all the work and all these things, there's so many things that made sense of like, oh gosh, okay, that was me being manic, or that was depression, or
Mhm.
that's what a mood swing looked like, and so um it was a very like obviously not the most ideal way to kind of discover something like that. But it really like threw me in this, another trajectory right away from that. And um at the time my parents were like, because I was ready to drop out of college, obviously I'm like, this is
Mhm.
too much, like I can't be doing this anymore. And they were like, is there any way you can stay in just one class to give you structure, like something that fires you up or like gives you excitement or brings you joy, like can you stay in one class? And so at the time I chose American Sign Language because it was the only thing I enjoyed. And then I ended up going hard into it and then ended up at Cal State Northridge with a degree in deaf studies.
Mhm.
And again, I'm still not doing anything creative, right? So I'm still trying to be like practical. And okay, what I'll do is I'll be an interpreter, an ASL interpreter for the government, because the government has a base rate of $100 an hour. It's like this
Wow.
practical side of me, trying to make it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
I'm a double Capricorn too. So like there's this whole other side of me that's like very logical and like wants to make it make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, even though, right, still so young though, because like that episode in my dorm room, I was 19, like God, we have no idea of
No.
anything at that time. What is that thing? It's like your prefrontal cortex or whatever is still developing. Like you just
Yeah.
like aren't even settled into who you are yet, right? Um, and so I'm still like, thinking like, okay, I got to go the practical route. So basically, I get this degree. First of all, I massively fail to get into the interpreting program. But I'm
Mm.
already there. I've already moved my life to Northridge. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'll just like stick through the deaf studies degree. And so I stuck through it, got that graduated in 2012. And it was impossible to get a job. Like I didn't have any certification in anything really. I just had this deaf studies degree that had a focus in community services. So it
Mm.
was impossible to get a job. And I just found myself like hopping from like desk job to job, like just different stuff, like, and wasn't sticking anywhere for too long. And then at some point, I found myself at a little business called Baja Designs. They do lighting for off-road vehicles. So my husband, now at the time is my boyfriend, he basically like hooked me up with like a potential job. They needed a receptionist. He was already working there. And I got hired as a receptionist and I stayed there for 5 years. And by the time that I left, I was their vice president. And the company had, I think, doubled in size throughout those 5 years too. And so throughout that process, I think it was 3 years in, I'm in management now. So the marketing department found my personal YouTube channel. And so what I always like say that's so funny about this is like, so it's the off-roading industry. So it's super like chill, right? It's a bunch of dudes. So like it's not like anything crazy buttoned up, right? But I'm still in management and I'm still like, I have to be like a leader, I'm manager Pauline, right? My
Mm-hmm.
YouTube channel is not that. My YouTube channel is like silly, goofy, like really my true, like my core is like silly, goofy time, just trying to make people smile and laugh, being silly. And the marketing department's like, hey, Pauline, we found your YouTube channel. And I'm like immediately like mortified. I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna drag me, is what I thought was gonna happen. And they were like, no, like we were just wondering, like, would you make a product video for us? Like, would
Mm.
you ever do like video in that way? And I was just like, oh, sure, like I'm down to try. I've never done it that way, but I'm down to try. So then I made my first video for them. And I remember the exact feeling of setting up my whole entire like camera setup and like being behind the camera and like actually getting to really direct for the first time.
Mm.
And it was that feeling of like, oh shit, like this is it. Like this is the thing I want to do right now. Like I'm it because let me also preface it with saying that yes, I had started my therapeutic journey when I was 19 and that was I think it was 2006. And I had been doing some work on and off. I found myself like kind of leaving therapy for a while, going back into it, on and off medication, because with bipolar disorder, you typically are on medication to like stabilize everything. I was on and off, like I was not committing, basically.
Mm.
And so, at this time, like I still was like not really understanding kind of just the mental health part of myself too, like, really what was going on. So I have this moment. Um, and also I still hadn't shaped, like I hadn't released the coping mechanism of which is essentially escapism when you think about like a suicidal ideation or like thinking about wanting to not exist anymore. It's escapism. I'm trying to just
Mm.
not deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so up until this point I still was every day thinking, having those thoughts. And so fast forward to this moment and I'm really sitting there thinking like, oh my God, like I really feel alive. Like I feel so alive right now doing this. And so I leaned into it. I think that was in 2016 when I made my first like professional video. I leaned into it. And I started to do it as a side hustle while I was doing my more than full-time desk job, which was very
Mhm.
intense. And I had communicated to the CEO at the time, who was my mentor, um, like I want to do this. Like I want to run my own business and I want to start this as a whole thing. She was super supportive. And long story short, we were looking for my replacement. We went through 3 replacements in like a year and a half.
Wow.
And we couldn't find, I shouldn't say we, but like, she wasn't happy with these replacements. And it was like, at some point, and I think I kind of like lesson learned now, but like I'm very like people pleaser, right? But there's also this part of me that wants to help. Like I so badly want to help people and like make sure that I provide and provide value and support. And so I vocalize like I won't leave until like you feel good about the person that's taking over my job, because I did have a lot of responsibilities at the time. And there was a lot of intricacies to like what I was doing. And so I was like, I want to make sure you feel good about the replacement, that they feel comfortable and trained. And so we would go through 3 replacements in like a year and a half. It was
I
less than
mean,
a year and a half.
that says so much about your commitment because most people
Yeah.
would just be like, I
two
need
weeks.
to go,
Yeah.
you know?
2 weeks. I gotta go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Thank you. And again, blessing and a curse, right? Because like
Yeah.
I was ready to move on and do this thing, but then there's this whole other responsibility or other thing that I felt called to do too. And so at the year and a half, and again, I'm still doing my side hustle throughout this entire time, with video and trying to build this thing for my video business, because at the time I was only focusing on video mainly. And at some point in that process, the CEO is like, I have an offer. She's like, what if, because they had sold the company, they got acquired, right? And so the owners were also trying to find their way, to retire, like move on.
Hmm.
And, she was like, hey, would you want to be our vice president? And threw like this number at me, right? That I've never heard, like the most amount of money I've ever been offered my entire life. And everyone, even though like in my gut, I was like, this is not really what I want to be doing. Like, I want to do, here I am, right? Finding myself in a place where I'm not being creative and I'm not leaning into kind of my deepest goals and dreams and hopes, right? Serving something else again. Um, and I say yes, because, not only was it like, how do I pass? Like, that was the conversation. How do I pass up an opportunity like this?
Right.
But really, everyone around me was like, I mean, Pauline, like that's crazy. Like you got a vice president. Like I was gonna be sitting, because at the time they were who had owned them, it's like all these high level CEO, like C-level, folks that I would be sitting at the table with these people, right?
Right.
And I would be
That's
like,
like the real picture of success, right?
right, thank you. That's actually a great way to say that. It's like, but that's like what we're all trying to strive and achieve for, right? And
Mhm.
being a woman in that space,
Yeah.
because it was still the off-road automobile space, right? And so being a woman in that space, let alone like a brown woman, like in that space with purple hair. I had purple hair at the time. And so, like I'm sitting there. I remember there was a time, because I obviously said yes, right? And so like there was a time where I had to go to like some, very corporate button-up meeting in Colorado, and I'm sitting literally at a round table with like all these C-level dudes, right? And I'm, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, how the heck did I get here? Like, how did
Right.
I get here?
Yeah.
And I'm just
Well,
like
and
really
I'm
thinking,
sure there's part of you that's like, I mean, you're breaking through so many molds, even just doing that, right? So you're like,
fair,
this is important. You like, there is
super fair.
part of this that's really important, and that
Yes.
satisfies probably
Mm,
your desire to make a difference, right?
mm.
So
That's
that
a really good,
probably made it more conflicting.
I've never, it's funny because that's how I am now. I think about that a lot now, where I'm like, no, like I gotta, I'm always pushing myself to take up spaces in places that make me uncomfortable, because it means that there's a difference to be made there, and all that. But I really didn't think about that at the time.
Mm.
Um, but you're absolutely right. That was a big part of like how it felt when I said yes also, because again, off-roading industry, like I'm going to be a VP of this very well-known brand, like in the off-roading industry too. I was like, I worked really freaking hard to like to get to this point. And I was grateful that the CEO saw something in me and offered that. And I was just like, yeah, I do want to take up space in a place like this. Like that is really freaking cool. And I remember at that table, you know, with the C-level folks, it was like it's very typical of what you think it would be like, what the conversations would be like at that table, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember there was a point where I also didn't have any rapport established with any of these folks. So like there was a point in that conversation where I was really feeling like something bubbling up in me where I needed to speak up against what they were saying.
Mm.
And everyone at the table is agreeing with each other for the most part, right? And I was like, oh God, should I say something? Like, I really don't like what they just said. I feel like I got to say something. It's very wrong, blah, blah, blah. And eventually I did. I like raised my little hand and I was like, I just have something to say. Everyone like snaps to me and I'm like, I just don't think like, I think you guys are approaching it wrong while I like speak my voice, you know, speak my 2 cents and say it. And I was like, I just think you need to shift your perspective on how you're looking at it and blah, 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 say all this stuff. And everyone was like, good point. And then they all started discussing the thing I was saying. And
Wow.
then the top of the top guy that was there, you know, he's the one who owns all of it, pulled me aside at the end. And he was like, I just want to say, like, you know, we need someone like you to call
Mm.
us out when we're saying something that isn't kind of like not relevant, but they were saying it was like uninformed, like they were just so uninformed about something. And I knew something more about the ground level of things. And so he was like,
Mm.
I really appreciate you like speaking up. I think you need to do more of that when you're sitting at these
Mm.
tables. And so it was like very rewarding, right, to be in that
Right.
space. And that's why I think it was so hard to accept that it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Right. Because
Right.
you just kept getting affirmed over and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Over and over, exactly. In so many ways, right? Not even just
Yeah.
like performance wise or like, you know, all these things, but like financially. Like my
Mhm.
husband at the time too, like we lived a very fruitful life at that time. And so it also, you know, when you think about what we visualize like for success as well, right? We think about, oh, you have to be making like a stupid amount of money.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with like doing what you love or
Yeah.
feeling fulfilled or, you know, all that stuff. And so at some point in this process, I had my second episode when it, you know, when it came to like my mental health came crashing down again.
Mm.
And you know, it was an interesting experience because I have had that experience already, right? Like I had already had this, oh, I'm ready to go. I'm starting to think about the process and really plan it out. Like it was such a frustrating experience at the time too, because I was like, how did I get here again?
Mm.
And I'm like pretty successful. If you look at the word, you know, if you're looking at the traditional way of success, I'm like, I'm really successful and I'm doing like a lot. I'm making a difference. Like I'm doing it, but it just so was not, I basically was not able to pour into no one's media and do any of the things I wanted to do. I was again doing things for others and what others thought I should be doing and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so you know, and my husband, you know, he hasn't had a lot of experience with supporting someone with mental health stuff, and so I'm, you know, the first time he's ever interacting with someone like this, and he's done his best to like understand me throughout the whole, but he doesn't have empathy, right? Because it's like he doesn't understand, like he really doesn't. But he's always tried to be there for me. And in this moment, again, I have gratitude for my experience because it pushed me to open up to him, because I didn't tell him pretty much this whole time that I was struggling.
Wow.
And this day that I was ready again, I was ready to do something. And it's so wild, and it's going to sound so silly, but I'm grateful for doing this very silly thing because I was in the middle of writing letters again, right? I'm writing my goodbye letters. And um, I was so blank in my brain at the time that I literally Googled, what's the best thing to put in a suicide letter? That's what I Googled. Okay. And in the side of this, the search results, suicide prevention line, call this line. There's always someone to help you, like all this stuff. And it was like all of this very like real things that you always hear about. You always hear about the suicide prevention line, like,
Right.
it's not, but the fact that it was like right there, it like snapped me back into like, this is real life, Pauline. Like, this is real life. You're literally sitting here thinking and making this plan again. And you know, I and it would have been easier this time. I had access to guns at this time. And so it's like this got so real so fast. And it stopped me in a place where I was like, I haven't even told Brennan, that's my husband, what I'm experiencing right now. And so then I decided, again, whatever happened, something snapped me out of it. And I was like, I have to talk to Brennan tonight. I talked to him tonight. I tell him everything. And he's instantly like, no, like, you have to quit tomorrow. You're going to go in and you're going to quit and you're going to start working on No One's Media. Like, you can't keep doing that. You can't keep doing this thing where you're not serving yourself, because it's clearly not.
So you knew at that point that that was part of the problem.
I knew that part of the problem was I'm not doing what I'm feeling called to do, which was pour into my business, right? But
Mhm.
I think it really went deeper than that. It's like I'm not being like, what's the word? I'm not doing what I meant to do, which is to be a creative. And I have expressed that to Brennan over time of like, I really want to do something creative someday. Like, it'd be awesome if I could be paid to be creative. And so I knew to a certain degree, like, because I had been trying to leave, right? I had been trying to leave this company. And it was like, I think it came down to like, wait, how am I here again? Like, I'm still at this company and I'm not pursuing this full time, this other thing.
Mhm.
And and maybe it wasn't like so obvious to me at the time that's like, oh, the answer is I need to quit, like actually just officially quit and pursue my business. But it was Brennan that was like, no, like, you clearly are so unhappy with what you're doing because you're not doing what you want to be doing or feel like
Mhm.
you're meant to be doing. Because that was something I always said too at some point, was like, I feel like I'm meant to be doing something bigger than what I'm doing now, or
Mhm.
something just, whatever that feeling is. Like, I feel like I have a calling and I'm not tapping into the calling.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so yeah, the next day I put in my notice and that's another thing too that was really important to me, was like, I don't want to like, what's the word? I don't want to hide behind why I'm really leaving. Like, I'm going to
Mhm.
be so honest with everyone. Like, I'm struggling mental health wise because I'm not doing what I want. Like, I wanted to make sure that I was so vocal about the mental health part, because again, my whole thing was like, I want to make sure that's a normalized conversation. And so, I shared with the CO at the time, and she was very supportive and loving. And every
Mhm.
person I shared that with was also the same. And it's male dominated, right? And so a
Right.
significant about of the men like sat me down individually and like started to share about themselves, and was like, I just want to let you know, like, thank you for telling me that. I've actually been struggling with this. And I
Mhm.
also had an HR responsibility at the time too. And so there was this other part where I felt very like, not only am I like leaving on my terms finally, but like, I want to make sure that everyone knows that I can be a place that they can like look to be like, okay, Pauline's like taking care of her mental health. Maybe I can also have that for myself, or maybe I can talk to her about that. I think that was like a big part for me. It was like, I want to make sure people know they can come to me for that type of support, because that is what gets us in that hole, is when we feel like we can't talk to someone, or we feel alone. Like, nobody's going to understand this. Nobody's going to support me. I'm all alone in this. I don't have anyone to talk to. I know for me, those are the times when I've gotten into a really dark place.
Mhm.
And feeling like you're not living your life like fully, like that for
Yeah.
sure was a big part of it. And so yeah, that was in 2018. I officially left that job and then went full into No One's Media, and now we're here.
So incredible. There's so many directions and so many ways that I want to take this, but you mentioned a moment when you they invited you to make the video for them, right? And you had
Mm-hmm.
this moment of like feeling alive. And
Mm-hmm.
but yet how long after that did you keep going in the job,
Yep.
right?
2 years. 2 years.
Mm-hmm. And so like that's what so many of us do is,
Mm,
I mean, we know it's in there, we feel it, but we feel like we just can't. Like it just feels too
hmm
big of a thing to have to do. And you took it and you went as far as your life was at risk.
Right. Right.
And it's like, how do we interrupt that? Right? Because like,
Mm,
at what point do you say it isn't worth it? Like, it doesn't matter, you know?
yeah. Yeah. Something I've actually said a lot more, obviously, once I've kind of went through all the healing was like if it costs you your mental health, it's too expensive. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth it. But I think the hardest part is it's kind of like I think a big part of it is money. I think that's a big part, right? Because the
Huge.
desk job is stable, right?
Yep.
The desk job is every 2 weeks you're getting the paycheck, right? And I will also say too, like, because or go leaning into your passions and the things you love doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur, right? You could go to another desk job, but maybe it's a brand or a company that has values that align with you, or
Yep.
maybe the position you're doing is like, oh, this is deeply rewarding or aligned with what I want to be doing, as an individual. And so I also want to be clear about that, because like being an entrepreneur or like freelancing is absolutely not for everyone. And
Right. And there could
yeah.
be I mean, I have had a little bit of this experience where it's like
Mm,
that's a whole other like that could be a whole
100%.
other risk to your mental health. Like
What? Oh
the
my gosh.
the
So
insecurity
true.
and the ups and downs. And so
Yes.
like you really do, I think the most important
Mm,
thing is that you find your mix, your blend of
yes.
whatever it is that's going to support
Yes.
to feel
Yes.
alive and
To
stay
feel alive.
secure
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yes, 100%. And I think, I feel like a big part is, um, we're scared of the unknown too, right? Because
Right.
if you leave the thing that like, even if it's terrible and not what you want, and, you're not having a great time, that feeling though. You're super familiar with that
Yeah.
feeling, exactly how you're going to cope with it. Like all of it is so predictable. But if you think about moving on and trying something new, or even leaving that comfort zone, that's super scary. And I think like it seems so simple, right? Well, like just leave, but like,
Right. Right.
we stay in those places because it's like, well, I have no idea what's going to happen if I go that route. I know
Yeah.
exactly what's going to happen if I stay here. And so I think that's like a big part of it. And I also like, it's interesting because I actually met someone recently, and they said something about uh so I could tell, like I was kind of, so I'm also an empath, so I could kind of vibe that they're a brand new person, but I was like, this person's going through something. I don't know what it is, but there's something, right? And at some point in the conversation they said, yeah, I'm just trying to like work my job until I burn out, and then like I guess from there I'll figure out what to do. And I
Mm.
was just like, but why? Why do you I was like horrified. I was like, why are you already saying like, oh, I know the process is I'm just gonna work myself till I burn out. Then that's when I'm gonna decide. And
Yeah.
I think that's interesting, right? Like that people, because I have heard that same vibe from people of like, we've kind of feel, which is kind of my experience, we kind of feel like we have to hit rock bottom first
Yeah. Well,
before we can start building up again,
right. Well, we also live in a society that supports and says, stay in the safe place and
Mm-hmm.
do the things that you're supposed to do. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. Like,
True. Very true.
this is just what you're supposed to do.
Right, right. Yeah, and I guess like for me, well, it's like kind of multifold, but like a big part of what's helped me kind of stay the path, and also like obviously jump into the path is like surrounding myself with people who are doing that thing, or someone like my husband who was like, he saw the importance of it and he was like, nope, like it was almost like someone on the outside looking in, right? That was
Yeah.
like, you need to like stop. Like he's like, just don't do that. Like, what about this? And so I think there's something to be said about that. I also was actively in therapy at the time. Again, despite like kind of having this really low, I was in therapy, but like I also was not opening up that deeply to my therapist. I had a barrier, that, and it was probably fear. I was scared of being real with her about like what I was really struggling with. But I think there's that other side too, where it's like, if you're not sharing with people the things that you're struggling with or the things that you need, people cannot be there to provide support to you.
Right.
And so that's it. I know that can be its whole other conversation, right? Of like getting over the fear of sharing. But that's the thing, the simplest thing that helped me finally get what I needed was to vocalize to people like, I'm having a freaking hard time, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not okay. Like, and that's scary to accept too, that you're not okay. And so I think just like using your voice, period, especially as a woman, using your voice, period, is so incredibly important. Um, and then the other side of it is I'm also very like spiritual. Like I try really hard to have a connection with I always say, like, because I don't know what the word is for myself yet, but I say universe, spirit, whatever, the bigger thing, right?
Yeah.
The bigger purpose, the bigger thing. Like I do try to stay very connected with that. And when I am very connected to that, I love synchronicities. That's like my way of getting validation or like messages of like, yes, keep going, or like, ooh, pump the brakes, And so I I know for me, like my mental health journey like was elevated once I started to deeply like put more work into being deeply connected with spirit or universe. That was a big part of my journey as well. So I feel like a lot of it comes down to someone making a choice. Do you want, one thing I say a lot is like, can't keep doing this, right? You want to keep
Yeah.
doing this? You don't want to keep doing this. So if we don't want to keep doing this, what do we got to do? Step
Right.
one, what's the baby step, right?
Right. And
And
the
so it has to
action,
be a
right.
choice. What's the actionable step that you got to do
Mm-hmm.
next? Yes. It really comes down to that person making the choice of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just unfortunate because a lot of times people do have to hit rock bottom before that choice is like, because then it's like I have no other choice now because
Yeah.
I'm at the lowest low.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw this post recently that was talking about how so much of society now is using meditation and therapy and all these different modalities that everybody talks about to cope with
Mm-hmm.
the the life that they're living that they don't want to be living instead of
Mm-hmm.
using it to
Instead,
create the life
yeah,
that they actually want
create the
to
life. Yes.
live. Right.
So, oh, I've never thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. It's used as a way to like cope with, yeah, yeah,
I mean,
because
I've
I
done
love
it.
that.
I've
Not
done
I
it.
love that. I don't want to say that, but you're right. Yeah, I've done it too. What I was going to say is like, because I've had a few therapists over my life, and that is a good amount of the work those therapists did was like, well, let me just teach you how to cope with the life you have, or let
Mm-hmm.
me teach you how to cope with the thing in front of you, right? My current therapist, that is not how we approach it. We talk more about purpose and fulfillment and aligning with your values, like, and a lot of those conversations kind of forces you to take different paths and not stay the path. And so that is interesting because I think that is a big part of the problem is just
Yeah.
like, no, 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 stay where you're at, but let me at least give you some tools and tips of how to live in that path instead of
Mm-hmm.
being open to other options.
Right, right. So, what would you say to someone who is in that space, who's like, they know they're not there, right? Like they know they're not living the life that they want, whether it's the job or the relationship or the place that they live or whatever it is. And they see something else, but it just feels impossible, right? Like there was a reason that you stayed in that job so long. Like something felt
Mm-hmm.
impossible about what was next. What was that action that you were going to take? Like whatever it was. So, what would you say to someone about going from that place to feeling alive and pursuing that, right?
Yeah. First thing I'd say is find community for sure. The more conversations I've had with other folks is where I've fully just like really discovered whether it's like where I'm meant to be, or I've discovered an option that I didn't even know was, for example, there's a really good friend of mine, and she's just a creative to her core, but she does a lot of like choreography. She's a dancer and she's incredibly artistic. And I remember just having a conversation with her in a way that was like, yeah, you're an artist, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, I just want to make sure Pauline, you're an artist too.
Mhm.
And then I was like, no, I'm not I just make video. Like I wasn't really thinking. She was like, you literally make art. You're an artist. And it was the first time that I even like realized like, oh, I can have that title. I've always wanted to be an artist, And so again, conversations with other people, and mine was rooted in therapy, right? But it wasn't until later that when I started to get older, where I started to actually find community in like other people. And those conversations have always either validated or shown me a way that I didn't know existed. So definitely community. And there's so many now, especially now, like we have so many online communities that
Yeah,
exist as well. Um, you just really have to like, again, make that choice that even if it's scary, you're still going to do it. Right.
right.
And because it's what's going to be
Yeah.
best for you. And so I think like, yeah, that's a very big one. I had another one, but it's gone. If it wants to find its way back, I'll say it.
Yeah, no, I love that because I remember one of the big kind of turning points. I've had so many in my life, but
Yeah.
one was where someone told me to to lean into what other people say about me, not what I think
Ooh,
about me,
mm-hmm.
but
Ooh, I love that.
what other people tell me about me, or how other people compliment me and what other people
Mm-hmm.
say. And it's like that start when I was like, so many people say these certain things about me. And I'm like, but I don't feel that way. But there must be some truth to it, right? If there's
Mm-hmm.
some reality of it out there in other people's view of me, then so like I love that.
Yes.
Like if you can get yourself in communities that are doing what you want and that are
Mm-hmm.
supporting that vision that you have, then that can give you just that little
Just a
glimmer.
little. Yeah, I think a big part of it too is like you have to be able to welcome like having it's like you have to welcome opportunities too. I think because if your perspective is so locked into this, because the whole thing like is you need to reframe. You need to
Mhm.
reframe and you need to shift. And if you stay, even if you start doing the work, right, going into community, having conversations, but you're still locked in with the blinders over here, everything's going to be going right over your head, right? And
Yeah,
so you have to loosen up a little bit and like widen your perspective. So that way, as you're getting these new, sparks and glimmers, you're able to also like welcome them
right.
because it's then it's not going to like so really serve you in any way. And I think like I love how you worded that. It's like someone else looking at you. That I've also like gotten support from like a life coach before, which I always had like these preconceived notions about what a life coach does, but it was really interesting because I found someone who was like the vibe, like we vibed immediately.
Uh-huh.
And the way she approaches her work is like not, it's just not like a typical life coach, but that was something she said. She said something about like sometimes it takes someone on the outside of the jar to look at the label and tell you like,
Hmm.
I don't know, I see you're passionate about these things, or I see you get fired up about these things. This is what I see on the label. What about that? And so like I feel like if you obviously don't have access to a therapist or a life coach, there's communities that can mimic that same exact support for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Like it sometimes takes another person to tell us like, oh, but like I think you're good at this thing. And so yeah.
Right. And how uncomfortable it is at first.
Yes, it
Right.
is. It is so uncomfortable.
Um, okay, so tell me a little bit about what life is like for you now. You're
Mm,
living a lot more aligned with who you are.
mhm.
I mean, it's clear in how you show up. So talk a little bit about that. What's like
Yeah.
life for you now?
Yeah. So life is definitely, obviously, mental health wise, like so much better. I have a lot more healthy, coping skills, a lot more tools and resources up my sleeve. But I'm, pursuing my business full time. There was a period of time too where fear took over and I found like a part-time job,
Mhm.
and it was like, I think I had 1 year of my business full on. And then like 3 years in, I was like, I had a part-time job because I got scared, and I think it was last year was the first year where I was attempting to do it full time again. Because I felt that same feeling of like, poor no one's media is always getting like the bottom of the barrel, whatever energy's left over, right, for it. And I was just like, I need to see what it would look like if I went full on. So um last year was my first year back of doing it full on. And though I'm again doing the thing I love and I'm so lit up about what I'm doing, it's the business at the end of the day. And it is freaking hard. Last year was really hard. A lot of wake up calls for me last year. And last quarter was it felt like the beginning of my business. It was the slowest quarter I'd ever had. And compared to the beginning of my business. And I was feeling a lot of thoughts that came up for me in that quarter was like all the self-doubt stuff. Like, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I even good at what I do? Like that was like a lot of the questions, like maybe this isn't it, all the things. And that birthday post was like kind of in the middle of like me kind of crawling out of that hole I was in, because I was starting to get into a mental health like place again, a low place again. And um one quick story I'll share about like what kind of has been helping me is like there was a couple of instances in January specifically where I was so validated in my knowledge and in my experience, like, me showing up for, new clients where, at the end they were like, thank you so much, Pauline. Like that was so helpful. Or it was like jobs where I ended up having to be more of a coach than just like a video production person, and coaching in content or showing up on camera, those types of opportunities. And in those opportunities, like the clients were just like, you've been so valuable, or like this experience was so valuable, so helpful. Like someone, what I remember, told me like, he said like, Pauline, you have so much experience. And at the time I was like, what do you mean you have like, I was like, and they were like, no, like we looked at your portfolio, like it's so robust and like you've done so many different things. It's not even just about the amount of work you have, but you've done different things. And it was like really sitting, it wasn't even at the time, I think it wasn't until I got home where I was like, oh, shit, I think they're right. I do have a good amount of experience. And it was it's just so funny, right? Because like when we don't, it's something I also say too, it's like when we don't stop to reflect,
Yeah.
we have if we don't stop to reflect and look back, we have no clue how far we've actually come, right? And it was that moment where I was like, because I was also starting to prepare like pitch decks for my services. And so in order to do that, I had to look at past work, pick and choose the best ones. And that process plus like some new client work, I was just like, oh my God, like I do have good work. Like I was like, I can do this. I am talented.
Wow.
And it's hard because it feels egotist, like it feels arrogant to say that, right? Especially again as women, right? We
Yeah.
feel like we can't like say that. You can't say that you're amazing or like that you're badass or you're talented. It's gonna come off as like you're so conceited or you're
Right.
full of yourself, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like that process was so helpful to be just externally validated, but also allow myself to see myself,
Yeah.
for my talents and my value and my worth. And then there was also a moment where I had a job where I was covering an event for like high net worth women entrepreneurs, right? Very intimate group. And I'm doing event coverage. So usually you're like fly on the wall, you don't interact with the event, and there was a point at this very long, amazing day with them. And they're going around the circle and debriefing and sharing. And uh, one of the women in the group like was like, real quick, I just want to make sure we acknowledge like Pauline for what she did today. um, Long story short, they did a jet skiing a adventure from Long Beach across the ocean to Catalina Island and then back. And
Wow.
I documented that process on a jet ski. And it was
Oh my God, how
wild and crazy and
fun.
amazing, right? Super fun. But the woman was like, let's like acknowledge what Pauline did today. Like she's like holding on the back of a jet ski one-handed, like with a GoPro in the air. She flew a
Wow.
drone up in there at some point, like she was just giving me my flowers and I was not prepared for
Yeah.
it, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, Pauline, yeah, like saying these amazing things. And then the hosts were like, do you want to say something? And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like I'm never again brought into the event, right? So then I step in and I was like, I won't take up too much space. And they all were like, stop. You are allowed to take up space. We are inviting you to take up space. So take up space. And I was just like, this is in the thick of January, right? So I'm already like emotional. And I'm like, okay, don't cry because I'm about to make it about me if I cry. So I'm like holding it in. And the first thing that comes to mind is to be transparent about my struggles the quarter before. So I share that. I share like I was really heavily considering shutting down No One's Media that quarter too. I was like, I don't know if this is it, which I know you very
Yeah.
much relate to that, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like I share this, and one of the women stops me, and she was like, "Hold on, I just want to do something real quick." And then she asked this group of women. There's like I think 10 or 12 of them. She's like, "How many of us, again, high net worth businesses, right?" She's like, "How
Mhm.
many of us have wanted to shut down our business?" And they all literally raised their hands. One of them was like, "Can I raise two hands? It's been multiple times." Yeah, that's exactly how I felt in the moment. Chills, like, and also very like the most overwhelming feeling of gratitude and feeling seen and held. Like I really felt held by the group because to see all of these, what I'm viewing as incredibly successful, they've made it type of women, like I'm thinking like their experience must have been linear, right? And they're all telling me, quite literally every single one of them was like, I've almost wanted to shut my business 3 times. Like it's freaking hard. And
Yeah.
they were all like, just know, Pauline, like this is, you're doing the work because you're meant to be doing this work, and stick through it. It's going to freaking be hard and you're going to have so many ups and downs, but know that you're not alone. We all got your back. Like they were basically just telling me, like, you're not alone. And this is like, we all feel this. And I just remember after the experience, sitting in my car and like instantly just sobbing from like gratitude and like again this overwhelming feeling of like, oh my god, like I feel so seen and all of that. And then a couple days later I make my birthday post and then I get that overwhelming support and love. And so since then, like I've shifted, and it's been like a process, but I'm trying to shift back into abundant, mindset and growth mindset, and trying to hyper focus on the things I'm grateful for and not the things that I'm lacking or I wish I had more of, because it's like, if you wish you had more of that, then what's the next actionable step to get more of that, And so trying my best to shift into that. And yeah, and then this month of March has been wild. Like I don't know about anybody else, but like the month of, like my word for the year is action, which also
Mhm.
has helped me shift my mindset, right?
Yeah.
Into I'm a person that loves to dream and like I'm an ideas person, and often I have a hard time executing my own dreams and goals because of fear, and I'm typically the reason why I'm always in my way. And the word for the year being action was really pushing me to do things that I've been scared to do,
Mhm.
and to do things for myself, and this month I feel like action has been all over it. And so there's just been so many wonderful things that have come up. New clients, because I've also been doing so much work to like network more, go back into community because I feel like I lost that connection to community.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that I would start to feel this kind of, it's like what goes around comes around, right? That
Mhm.
energy too. And it's like if we think about abundance, and if we think about money as an energy, right? Like it is always flowing in and out, but you have to be putting out, like you have to put out what you're wanting to get back. And so that's kind of like where I'm at right now. It's like my business is still not financially right in the place. I'm doing the work to get it to the place I want it to be.
Yeah.
Um, And I'm also doing my best to be so grateful for what it looks like now. And all of the little seeds I've been planting and been watering, and now they're starting to sprout. And that's the part that I'm like super like fired up and excited about, because there's naturally they're all sprouting this month, and so I'm like, oh god. And so I'm also trying to be like, okay, get organized, Pauline, like tap into the Capricorn, and like, okay, what do we, I use Notion for like project management, so I'm like really trying to get organized and everything. But
Yeah.
it's again, it's exciting, and I'm really, the mind shift is not going, like I'm trying not to get into the place of like, yeah, this is exciting, Pauline, but are you making money right now? Like, because that's it as a business, right? It's like we want the now, we want the money right now. But it's a long game, and it's like so much consistent effort to make sure that you get to the place you're trying to go to.
Yeah. And it's so true what they say about having your own business, like the first however many years. I don't want to put a number
Mm,
on it because
mm-hmm.
but like you're just planting seeds in the beginning. And so
Yeah.
it's like, and at the same time, you want to quit while you're planting the seeds because they're not
Yeah,
sprouting quick
because
enough.
not all of them
And
will sprout. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but one of the things that you said, and I feel like this is so true for me too, is every time you don't quit and you keep
Mm,
going, you'll come through another season of sprouting,
mm, mm-hmm,
right? And you
mm-hmm.
don't get to experience that unless you keep going.
Yes, that is, I think that's so difficult. Because you have to like really want it. You have to really, really want it. Because it makes me think of like a farmer, quite literally, right? A farmer has no control if like the season is going to be more, super fruitful.
Yeah.
But because they have invested in this land and in this work, they're like, well, I guess I'm just going to try again next year, and whatever happens, I'm going to do the same work, or I might try something different. I'm going to plant the same types of seeds and stuff, but like, whatever the earth is going to give me this year is what it's going to give me. And so like, I think there's like that part too. It's like, you have to really understand like your commitment to it, and want it, because it's hard. It's like, I want to say like, if you don't really want to, you won't keep going, but that's not true, because your fear will push you
No.
out of it super
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
um but that's why you lean into the community. That's why you lean into people who are going to be like, no, 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 like you got this, keep going. Like I think about, the wonderful group you have. And there's some of us who will do that, where we're like, well, I don't know, like we'll like shy it off, and
Yeah.
the rest of the group would be like, like, no, you're
I
freaking worth
love
it,
that.
or like take up space. And it's like really awesome. And so that's why I say the community part is so important too.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to believe in something that you can't always see yet. Like that's something that I've
Mm.
taken on is like having delusional belief in
Yes, yep. Delulu is the Salulu.
yeah. Yeah. Which is hard,
It's
but it
true.
does, it's true. Um
It's so great. One of the last things I'll say about this, though, just because it is like kind of just with the whole like women's entrepreneur thing. There's a group of other women that I come in community with, and we've talked about this, like this fear-based approach to like how we run our businesses. And one of the women had said like, maybe we just need to start thinking like men sometimes. Like, what would a man do in this situation? And I would be like, a man would delusionally walk into it and be like, yeah, I own this place, or like, yeah,
right?
already I'm successful. So delusional, right? Or like the
Yeah.
ideas that some men throw out there. Sometimes it's like, bro, are you good? Like, no, that's not how it should go. It's like, okay, I was like, I love this idea. Like, what would a man do? And so it's like
Right. Oh
trying
my God.
to,
I have a community
so
where we
funny.
talk about turning off our brain the way that men do. Cause like they don't overthink
Yes,
things and they don't like, they're like, oh, well,
100%.
this is what I'm going to
Yes.
do. And
So
that's it.
I'm gonna do it.
And we're like,
And
well, if I do
I
this,
love
and we're like,
it.
so we
Because
talk
we're more
about,
emotional. And I think
yeah.
that kind of taps into the work that I know that I've done. I don't know about you, but it's like trying to balance my masculine and feminine energy together,
Hmm.
because like we all have it, every single one of us, men and women, right? All of us. And And I think it's about like making sure that those energies are balanced, because we really thrive when they're balanced and we have all of it.
Yeah.
But often like we do lean hard into our feminine, which it tends to be more soft and timid, and not timid, it's not the right word, it's soft, and so it's like I love the concept of like a man would do that. I think about my husband, he's literally like, but it's not that simple. It's not that simple. There's all
I
these other
know.
things.
I know.
It's so funny.
It is funny. That's like we could do a whole other
I
episode
know.
on that.
I know.
Okay, I want to give you the chance to share about your current project that's happening at the
Mm-hmm.
end of this month. Just
Yes.
the Disruptors Table.
Yes, the disruptors table. And so yeah, so it's going to be on March 25th at Hair Hub in Mission Valley, and it starts at 5:30. But kind of a quick backstory and how it came up. I've attended so many networking events like in my career. And there are some that I've attended where I'm like, wow, that was not it. And there were ones I've attended where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with how they did that. And I've always just had this like kind of like itching to like create my own, and like kind of either create my own networking event or just create my own space. Like I love the idea of like kind of curating something that's a reflection of me. And I feel like I've been told like a lot over my life of that. People appreciate my vibe or appreciate the way that I speak, or like one-on-one people have like said like, I love this space you've curated with me. And so I've kind of been taking all of that and been wondering like, wow, it'd be really cool to like do my own thing someday, right? But
Mhm.
naturally fear, all the stuff like, no, I can't do that, that's not for me, like all that. And so what kind of sparked it was more recent. I think I had attended a few speaker panel events, and I was just thinking like, oh, it'd be really cool to attend one that was filmmaker based, because that's also like that's my passion. It's like, yes, I do video and photo and social media for my job, but my passion is really making films. And so I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to go a filmmaker when I started, looking Eventbrite, all this stuff, and I couldn't find like a filmmaker panel or a female filmmaker panel. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe something like this doesn't actively exist in San Diego County, because there's a huge film community in San Diego County. And
Mhm.
then it like turned into I could literally make that. I was like, I could produce that. Like I could easily do that. I have a lot of experience in producing events from past jobs, and also just supporting friends produce events. But it's like I've never actually produced one for myself. It's always
Mhm.
been always in support
Yeah.
of someone else, something else. And so then what happened, very similar to what you're talking about with like once you started thinking about rebranding, the ideas flowed, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd love to do a panel series where I highlight a female filmmakers. And then it was like, oh my God, what if it was like highlighting all these other people? Like, what if it was highlighting artists? What if it was highlighting these, all it was just, it flowed so quickly of
Mhm.
like basically all these themed panels started to show up.
Mhm.
So then I was like, because I'm also very big on like, well, I don't want to show up the same exact way other people are showing up too. Like, I don't want to just give them another panel, networking event. I was like, how can I do this differently? How can I approach it differently? Well, and the first thing that came up was like me, like, my energy is definitely a lot different than the types of people who are hosting these types of events. And then I was like, well, most of the time, people who are invited to be like kind of on these panels are people who are already successful or have already gotten there, the place where it's always these super successful folks. Or like if I'm thinking about like someone in marketing, oh, they have millions of followers, like millions of views. And I was like, but I don't want to put people on a panel like that. I want to put people who don't often get that platform or
Mhm.
space to speak like that, and get to be in the spotlight. I want to have a conversation with people who are in the thick of it, who are a work in progress. Like, because when I'm at those those panel type of events where it's all these successful folks, yeah, I'll walk away feeling inspired, like, cool, that was really inspiring, but I don't relate to you.
Yeah.
Like, you're so far in your journey that like I am nowhere near where you're
Mm-hmm.
at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times it doesn't actually inspire me to take an actionable step towards that direction because it's so unattainable. Like it's like you're really like
Yeah.
that's just so not me. Um, so it's great for inspiration, but not helpful for action, right?
Right.
And like I said, the times where I have felt inspired to take action on things is when I've talked in those small communities with people who are literally in the thick of doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
When I think about your meetups, right? There
Yeah.
was a couple of actionable steps that came from that I pitched at Creative Mornings, right? Then
Yeah.
that after that, I did the thing I said I was going to do. I started to show back up on my social media because I spoke that into the group. And so I feel, and because again, everyone gets me. Everyone's like, yeah, I'm like literally trying to, I'm right there. So again, that's kind of what I was thinking about for the panels. Like, I really want to put people on the panel who could speak to that experience because they're in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I started to think about like the word disruptor was coming up a lot for me during that time. And which quite literally was like a month ago when I was really vocalizing this. But that word was coming up and it was coming up because I was really thinking about like kind of the women that's been around me, like a lot of them are doing things like against social norms, against going against the grain. We're breaking like generational trauma and curses by doing what we're doing. Like for me, the way that I kind of go against the grain is like showing up one as a woman in video production, because like that does like especially the film world too, but like video production does tend to be led by males. And the level for me too is I'm showing up as a brown woman, and so like I think there's something to be said about that as well. And so the disruptors, I was originally calling it the disruptors panel, and it's a scientific term, and so I was like, okay, I don't want people to get confused. I don't want like a bunch of scientists to show up to my event, like what's this. So then I was like, what's another like kind of way, and then I thought about table, because those are the times I've had really good conversations have been across the table with someone,
Yeah.
or round tabling it with a bunch of people, right? And so yeah, I vocalized it for the first time about 3.5 weeks ago. And the response I got just from like saying, I have this idea, I want to do this year, and I want to do it like quarterly if I can. And everyone was like, well, do you have tickets up? Like, I want to already book a ticket. And I was like, I just started vocalizing this. I'm like, I don't have anything. I was like, but I appreciate the support. I love the excitement. And then, there was some people who basically were like, this needs to happen, like you got to do this, like I need this, I selfishly want you to do this so I can attend.
Yeah.
And all I had was like a couple of women who basically were I was like, okay, well, what do I got to do to like make this happen? And it was just like the second that I vocalized that this was the thing I'm going to do, it was like strings of yeses. Like it was wild, like very universe putting me exactly where I needed to be and giving and providing me exactly what I needed. And to be honest, it was stemmed a little bit from a woohooey moment. I got like a reading, and like the reading was so clear of like, like the thing you're about to do is going to be very linear. It's not going to be
Mm.
crazy, like windy. And once you choose the path, you're going to shoot off like a rocket down that direction. And I was like, cool. So then I went in this direction, and it quite literally has been that experience. Like the fact that I was able to, because it's self-produced. It's like obviously don't have funding, right?
Yeah.
And the number one thing was like, I need to lock in a location, and I need a location to collaborate with me on it. And I threw out like literally DMs and Instagram just to get myself out of my head and like, let me just try. And one of them, Hera Hub, the founder, is actually who was like DMing me, said yes, and was like, and I also asked them like, would you be open to be on the panel? And she said yes. And I was just like,
Oh.
oh my gosh, okay. So then I just kept going in that route, and it has been, I wasn't planning to align it in Women's History Month, but I was sharing with a friend like, yeah, I want to do it every quarter, and this was in February. She was like, the quarter ends next month. And I was like, shoot, you're right. And then she also said like, and you're planning like a full female led panel. She's like, what if it's perfect, Women's History Month? And I was just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, yes. And so once I locked from the moment of me verbalizing the concept, I locked in the venue in two weeks. And then from there, it's just a rocket ship. Just like everything has been yeses. And yes. So I'm just so freaking excited because it's like, one, obviously it's like something I'm doing for me, but like this really is for the community, because like my whole thing too is like I wanted to create, especially nowadays, right, with what we're experiencing in America specifically, but like having these spaces where people can come together in community and feel hope, inspiration, and safety. Like those are the things that I want people to feel.
Yeah.
And I hope that they feel from coming into a space like this. And, there's that other side of it too, where it's like, what if someone's sitting in the crowd and they're in that space where they're like kind of confused about, I really don't think I like what I'm doing. I'd like to do something else, or, they're kind of scared to take the next step. And then the people on the panel are going to share what they're doing. And there might be a spark for that person in the audience, And so there's so many things that I'm like so excited about this. But yeah, it's been a very wild ride. And I'm just so grateful for the support from everyone in my community, which have mostly been women, and also the support from universe. I have to definitely, because that's universe provides, like that's been what I've been saying, because that's exactly the experience.
I love that because sometimes I feel like so what you're saying is like as soon as you start taking action
Mm-hmm.
that's in alignment with what your
Mm-hmm.
passions are and what makes you feel alive, right? The universe shows up
Mm-hmm.
to support that. And like all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, like you're saying, everything lines up and all the people and all the places and all the things line up.
Yep.
And sometimes I feel like I know I've had this experience where I'm afraid of that success too, because it's like,
Yes,
well, what
yes,
am I going to
which is so
do?
weird.
How am I going to handle that?
How
Like,
am I going to handle that? Yep.
yeah, because that's like
Yep.
a whole other level that you have to step into. Also,
Yes,
you're
100%.
stepping into a new role in your life and you're showing
Yes.
up as someone that's different than who's shown up
Mhm.
before. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of fear in that too. So,
Oh my gosh, yes. It's funny because like obviously I'm, if you haven't been able to tell from this, I'm outgoing. I have no problem like having conversations. And then there was a day, I think it was this last week, where I was sitting with the concept of like what I've been producing, right? And what's going to happen, which is I'm going to be sitting up there hosting this panel and having conversations. And I instantly started to feel like, oh my God, what if I don't know what to ask? Oh my gosh, what if like I don't know what to say? And like there was like all of this thoughts, right? Of like, oh, I'm at the front. I'm leading this. I'm not in the background like I normally am cheering on someone else doing it. I'm like, oh, I'm at the front. And then I was like feeling very like it's like, that fear of getting in the way of like, can I do this? Oh my gosh, like how scary. And then also reminding myself, like, you literally like curated it specifically to be this way. And like, you wanted to be at the front. You wanted, like, this is the thing you've been like wanting to do, is step more into that role. And I have been saying this, I feel it in my gut that there is something that's going to, this event series is going to take me or my business in a route that like I'm wasn't thinking of. It's going to open some path that I'm not like almost prepared to like go in, but I'm excited. I feel something very specific to this work and this community I'm trying to build that's going to change almost everything. And it sounds so dramatic to say that, but like that's how it feels. It feels very important.
yeah, yeah, I believe in that. I believe that for you.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and I believe that, like, I want my whole life to be like that, where
Yeah.
like I'm constantly making decisions that are in alignment, and the universe
Mm.
is just like, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
like,
of course.
like, of course, why not?
Yeah, why, well, the way I've been like thinking about it, I'm so visual, right? It's the video and film side of me, but I just imagine like universe as a character that's like waiting, like, oh, okay, now you want to, you're ready? Are you ready? Because it's
Yeah,
literally, I've had this path like paid for you.
yeah,
And they're like, it's about, I'm so glad you showed up because I've literally been waiting for you. And so I
exactly.
just feel like that is like and even like even if let's say like you're not someone who's super spiritual, right? Let's say like you're just not that person. There is something to be said about vocalizing the thing that you want, not just to yourself, right? Even if you wrote it down, like get it out of your head, pen to
Mhm.
paper, and then vocalizing it to a community. Like
Yeah,
if people want the thing, or people are ready to, like, the people will support you in the
Yeah.
thing that you're trying to achieve. And there's just something, again, I feel like that's like the theme and the repetitive thing here. It's like, when you vocalize to the community what you need, they're going
Yeah.
to show up for you. The
Yeah.
people, that are meant to support you will show up for you and help you make it happen.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it does take that push to get into the action part of it,
Yeah.
and sit down and write all those action items, and have someone say like, cool, that's awesome, okay, now when are you going to do it? Like, can I
Yeah.
support you in getting that done? And so it's like that, there's just so much to be said about vocalizing your dreams, hopes, goals, like all of that, because that is really what happened with me. If I, like, again, universe just happened to show up and provide, but it started from me vocalizing the dream.
Yeah.
That's really where it started.
Putting it out into reality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the date is, tell me again, the
Yeah,
date.
yeah. It's a Tuesday, March 25th at Hair Hub in Mission Valley, and it's starts at 5:30 and goes to 8.
And people can register how?
Oh, event. Oh, that's something I didn't say. Yeah. So you can get the tickets on Eventbrite. And so I'm trying to make these events like accessible. So right now the tickets are free or donation, whichever you like, but free.
Awesome. I love it. I'm so
Yeah.
excited for that. And I love
Yeah.
that you've partnered with Hera Hub. I've done some things at Hera Hub have they've actually ordered from Shark my
Oh
business.
my gosh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So they're amazing.
They are.
Makes me
If
want to,
anyone doesn't know, real quick, who Hera Hub is,
yeah.
I should make sure to say that.
Yeah.
They are a co-working space geared towards women-owned businesses and brands. And so they actually, I want to say they have 6 locations. Majority are here in Southern California. And I think they have one in Washington, D.C., but don't quote me, somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah, they have
Um,
they have a few newer ones.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And so very cool. Yeah, it's a very, very cool space. Yeah.
Awesome. And then where can people find you and No Ends Media?
Yeah. Well, my website is noensmedia.com. And right now I'm trying to focus on growing my personal account, which is kind of becoming like one and the same with No Ends Media, but it's Pauline, Pauline .Scully, Scully. And I've been saying, yes, that's Scully, like the X-Files. I have a lot of people are like, oh my God, like the X-Files. Yep, yep, that's my last name.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay,
funny.
awesome. And I'm going to put all that in in the notes
Awesome.
too. But thank you so much. I feel like we could talk
I know.
all day.
Literally.
So thank you so much for sharing yourself so vulnerable. I can't talk anymore. Vulnerably, and being so open with us. And I just
Yeah.
love your story, and I love what you're up to. And I love that you've been
Yeah.
joining us every month. And
Yeah.
yeah, I look forward to seeing everything continue to evolve for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you for creating this space. Like I've been saying, like especially the group, like it's this beautiful, intimate, wonderful group. So thank you for making spaces like this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I I feel like I should say, like, we do have if you're in San Diego,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
we have a group called the Womenpreneurs Way, and we meet once a month, and it's for women to come together and bring their vision to life, just like we've been talking about here today. That really is the passion behind why I started that group, is so that you can have a community of people who see the vision with you and help you bring it to life. So yeah.
Yes, yes. Please come.
Yeah, please. All right. Well, thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.